Hello, everyone, and welcome to AFCPE Ethics. My name is Summer Red, and I'll be your presenter today. We are recording this webinar. It will be available after the presentation is over if you want to watch it, or if you want to share it with others, that you can tell them that it's available on demand. So, on screen, we're going to get started right away with a true-false question. To answer true or false questions, and they will come up, please type your answer in the chat box. So true or false, this webinar will be very interactive. Take your best guess. Okay, we have a lot of people posting the correct answer. Okay, so that is true. Now, there are a few rules of interactivity because this is a really large group of folks attending this webinar. First off, does everybody see where the hand raise button is? If you do see it, please click it right now. Okay, I see lots and lots and lots of people are raising their hand. That's excellent. We are going to have some ethical scenarios that are going to come up, and we're going to allow people to talk. So if you want to talk when a scenario comes up, please raise your hand. Keep in mind, we have almost 290 people signed up for this webinar, so I cannot guarantee everyone will have a chance to speak. However, to maximize the number of people who get to speak, I will be timing everybody. So when you raise your hand and I select you, I'll say your name, I'll unmute you, and at that moment, you will have 1 minute to speak. Please, please, please do not make me cut you off because I will feel like a horrible person if I do, okay? But I will do it because I want to make sure that as many people have a chance to speak as possible. Okay, and again, if you have questions, type away. Because we have so many people and because the chat box is flying past so quickly, I may not catch every question. If I don't answer it, please jot it down. We're going to make sure we have time set aside for questions at the end. You can also keep attempting to try, but just keep in mind, I may not catch every question right as it goes through, as we have hundreds of people responding all at one time. Okay, so those are the rules. Let's get started with ethics. How do you guys define ethics? And please type your answer in the chat box. How do you define ethics? Internal cues, doing what's right, doing the right thing, doing what's morally right, CLF, doing what's right, values, integrity. These are all good answers. So when I was starting on working on this webinar, the first thing I did was try to look up a definition for ethics. And you know what? Ethics is really, really hard to define. Turns out ethics is less of just a word and more of a philosophical movement. And ethics turns out to be is very situational. Yes, it's doing what's right, but not everybody agrees with what is right. You know, everybody's got a different set of values. For example, the ethics of the Catholic Church and the ethics of Planned Parenthood in many ways are going to disagree. Okay? So part of being ethical is to know what your ethical requirements are. What standard are you currently working towards? What is the ethical code that is guiding your actions? And so the first step is knowing what you're following. Okay, so first step of ethics is how do you handle a difficult situation? What is the best way to handle a difficult situation? Having values, doing what's best for clients. It depends. I have a lot of depends. Okay. Okay, what is the policy? Stay calm, ask questions. Retreat. That's a very interesting response. I appreciate that one. Okay. Following guidelines. Listening to all sides. Getting as much knowledge as possible of the issue. Listening to all sides. So can I tell you, no one seems to so far have the exact same answer that I have, because I think the best way to handle a difficult situation is to plan for it in advance. Okay? So the best way to prepare for problems is to prepare for the problems, to know that they're going to come, because everyone is going to have to deal with a difficult ethical situation. And so the best way to be ready for those is to have thought about them in advance. So today we're going to talk about the AFCPE Code of Ethics. Remember, that is those ethical guidelines that you as an AFC or someone else certified by AFCPE are agreeing to follow. We're going to have a lot of questions about the standard of practice kind of interwoven throughout this webinar. But the other thing I want you to keep in mind is your organization is also going to have its ethical guidelines, okay? And so you have to know what your organization's ethical guidelines and practices are, and you have to follow those as well. In fact, that is one of the requirements for the AFCPE Code of Ethics. So let us take these in turn. We're going to go through each of AFCPE's Code of Ethics, which are wonderfully wordy. So I have the technical line for each code of the Code of Ethics, plus also my interpretation. Okay, so first, conduct myself in a credible manner, striving for excellence in providing services with competency, diligence, promptness, and care to the best of my ability. In other words, be the best you can be. Okay, even when you're having a tough time, just do the best that you can. That's part of your Code of Ethics. Grow in professional practices, keeping abreast of industry developments and striving to improve my professional competency through continuing education. That means you got to do continuing education. And for the AFC, that is 30 CEUs every reporting period. And don't forget, 2 of those must be in ethics. Everyone here today is satisfying those right now. Next, exhibit personal and professional honesty and integrity in advising and counseling clients. Be honest. I feel like that should be a gimme, but it's important to remember. Recognize my limitations and refer clients when appropriate. Know your limits. It's really, really important that if you don't know something, you don't just try to make it up. This is not a guesstimate situation, okay? This is not an educated guess situation. This is a only speak if you know for sure that you're telling the truth. Maintain high standards of ethical conduct according to the objectives of the institution with which I am affiliated. Again, that means if your employer has rules, you need to follow those too. Respect the privacy of clients and the confidentiality of the client-counsel relationship in all matters pertaining to the course of professional service, revealing client information of any kind to others only with the express informed consent of the client. Maintaining confidentiality is obviously a huge portion of our standards of practice. Okay, and David made an excellent point. The right referral is better than your best guess. That is absolutely true. Accept compensation that is fair and reasonable and assist clients in finding other services if my fees are not affordable. Genuinely, I would hope that is self-explanatory. Okay, be fair and make sure that nobody's left out just because they can't afford your rules. Okay. So I have a question for Julianne. Were these materials sent? They are not. They will be afterwards. We're going to go ahead and have the slides available when we're done. Also, the Code of Ethics and the Standards of Practice are available on the AFCPE website. So whenever you want to check them out, go to the website and you'll actually be able to access them all there. Okay. Avoid any act or omission which violates the relevant criminal codes of any state of the United States or any province, territory, or jurisdiction of any other country. Don't break the law. Again, I would hope that would be pretty self-explanatory. Report any felony related to the practice of the profession or which brings disrepute to the profession or any lesser crimes which involves misrepresentation, fraud, extortion, misappropriation, or theft, or any conspiracy to commit such a crime to the AFCPE Executive Board. In other words, don't cover up a crime. Okay. The other thing, as a reminder, this Code of Ethics, every time that you renew your certification, you are agreeing again to follow these. Report any professional suspension by governmental or industry self-regulatory authority of a license. So again, be honest, again, even if it's embarrassing, even if it means that you lost your license elsewhere, you need to let us know that. Make no false or misleading statements to the Executive Board of AFCPE, its Certification Program Committee, or its Professional Review Board. In other words, don't lie. Notice a lot of these basically mean be honest. Okay. Respond in a timely fashion to all requests of the Executive Board of AFCPE, its Certification Program Committee, or its Professional Review Board. Be responsive, and that's to us, but you should be responsive to your clients as well, of course. So, now that you've seen the Code of Ethics, let's get started on our first ethical scenario. You have a male client who often makes statements like, you know how women are, and my wife understands who wears the pants in our family. At the same time, he is constantly complaining about how much money his wife is spending. Today, he came into the office and said, well, we won't have to worry about her blowing my money anymore. I finally put her in her place. What do you do? And we're going to go ahead, type responses in the chat box, but if you would like to actually speak on the phone, raise your hand, and I will pick some folks at random. Okay, remember, once I pick on you, you will have 1 minute to speak. So be ready. And Jimmy Ingram, we're going to start with you. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, because you're echoing, I'm sorry. First, I don't see where it didn't mention that he did any physical harm. He just made a statement. So I would just listen to him.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we're going to thank you, Jimmy. So someone else want to raise their hand? I'll pick another person at random. We have Marsha Clark. Marsha, go ahead. Marsha, are you speaking? You seem to be on mute. All right, we're going to try Mark Blythe-Baum. Go ahead.
Well, hi. I was just going to write something. I would probably try to ask an open-ended question such as, help me understand what you mean by putting in her in her place. And that would hopefully open up the door for some conversation. And then if any ethical issues come up, then deal with them after that. But I think we need to explore what he means.
Excellent. All right, we'll take one more person over the phones. I also see a lot of great comments in the chat box, so if you've not been checking there, do that now. Sharon Cabine, you have 1 minute. Go ahead. Sharon, can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, go ahead. You have got a minute.
Okay. So I probably would explore referring this family to some therapeutic counseling, to a family therapist, marriage and family therapist, for some counseling in order to deal with those kinds of issues so that we could deal with the money issues, which I specialize in.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So all right, so we have some excellent comments in the chat box. We had some really excellent comments on the phone. I agree, Sharon is right. However, keep in mind, a lot of people who make statements that might sound bad are not necessarily statements that guarantee that violence has happened, and that's something else that's come up. So this is, again, where having a plan in place is valuable. Hopefully, during some of the earlier conversations we had when there seemed to be a lot of misogyny that might have been going on, you were discussing having family therapy there, which is an excellent option. But if you're really worried about physical violence in the household, giving information to someone who may be an abused spouse can put that spouse in danger if the potential abuser knows about it, the perpetrator knows about it. So one thing to consider is hanging information about domestic violence centers or call numbers in all of your bathrooms. You can do that right now, and that way nobody has to worry that it applies to them specifically. Okay, but it is important to self-manage. Thank you, Lucia. These are really important things to consider. You cannot jump to conclusions, and you can't take sides. Okay, so your job is to listen, to help benefit everybody as much as possible, but also not to jump to conclusions. Okay, but you also have to make sure if somebody's in danger that you do find a way to help them in such a way as it protects everybody. Okay, oops. So, creating a plan, really, really important when you're trying to protect your counselors from dangerous scenarios like these. Okay, so I encourage you to think like a chess player. You know, chess players think 10, 15, 20 steps ahead. All right, so first step is anticipate challenges. I'm sure every counselor has had at least one unpleasant or weird scenario that's happened in their life, right? So brainstorm with your counselors. Come up with the scenarios they've had that have been problematic in the past. Try to imagine really awful ethical scenarios and then imagine how you'd respond to those. Okay, so you want to identify solutions. That means having policies and procedures, One recommendation a coworker had was a right to report policy, which is an excellent idea. It's a policy where you basically say, coming in, okay, under these circumstances, I am going to have to break confidentiality. And our clients are going to know about that, and they're going to sign up and agree to it. So it's like mandatory reporting, but inside your agency. And that protects your counselor because they don't have to make that tough call about whether or not they need to report something. Here are the things that we say you need to report. Okay, that's predetermined. And you have to have ongoing staff training. You know, you're not going to have bad clients every single day, so it's really easy to let some of these rules slip. Okay, so you need to protect yourself. You need to protect your staff, and training does that. Again, preempting negative responses is absolutely the goal. Okay, so you will want to have a client's rights and responsibilities. That way you protect yourself and your agency against dangerous clients. Ideally, you'll have a signed behavior agreement, and that basically just means the client knows what they're getting into. And more importantly, if you ever have to actually put into place your rules, regulations, your right to report policy, this way the client has been forewarned, and hopefully the client will remember what they signed and they will not get aggressive. They know that there are rules in place. That gives them boundaries that they'll have to follow. Okay, and protect your staff and your organization. So even though it's not specifically related to ethics, having an emergency or disaster plan is really, really vital. My last employer had an active shooter plan. To the best of my knowledge, they've never had a shooter, but you don't want to realize that you needed that plan when an active shooter is actually on site. Okay, so you want to have plans in place. You want everybody to know what those plans are. You need to have a dangerous client plan. You need to have a way for a counselor to call for help if there's a client, if he or she is feeling uncomfortable in a client situation. Okay, and again, not necessarily entirely about ethics, but really companies should have an intentional self-care policy. And more importantly, that policy needs to be modeled by management. If management is saying you should not work 60 hours a week, then management should probably not be working 60 hours a week because clients will follow what management is doing. All right. So, any questions on anything to date? Okay, well, keep typing them in as they come up. Consider the previous scenario. Would you do anything differently if the genders were reversed? And this is where it becomes really important with ethics to consider yourself. You need to actually truly be honest with yourself, right? Would you truly hear a woman say, "Oh, he is such a pain. I'm going to totally make him do what he's supposed to"? Would you hear that the same from a woman as from a man? Okay? If not, that is awesome. But again, self-analyze and just make sure that's true in the heart of yourself. Okay? All right, trivia question. Type your answers in the chat box. How many standards of practice does AFCPE have? So far, I don't have any of the right answers, so I'm glad we are all trying, although a lot is pretty close. Still no right answers, although you might be typing faster than I can read. Still no right answers, but we might go through all. Oh, wait, Ashley wins. That is the correct answer. We have 51 standards of practice. Now, you haven't actually read them all. They are available on the website. Again, a lot of them seem like common sense and I'm sure you all appreciate. I will not actually make you look at 51 in a row, but we're going to see a lot of those through trivia questions. And if you've never read them before, I highly, highly, highly encourage that you do so, because again, these are the standards that you have agreed to follow as an AFCPE certificant. Okay, so let's go through a few of them. True or false, it is okay to accept referral fees from a company as long as they are nonprofit and the referral is in the client's best interest. Okay, I have a lot of falses. That is correct. Client fees are never, or referral fees are never okay. Trivia question. What should you do if a client asks you a question and you don't know the answer? Okay. Excellent. So I have a lot of finding out or research or refer. And that's fine. You don't necessarily have to refer to somebody if it's something you know you can find the answer yourself. But don't say, here's my guess. Say, I'm going to look it up and I'll call you back, or this is outside my field of expertise, I'm going to refer you to someone else. Okay, so these are excellent answers. Trivia question. Okay, so here's your answers. Are true or false? Being friends with a client is forbidden under Standards of Practice 3, dual relationships. I have a mix. I have trues and I have falses. Guys, this is why you should go read the Standards of Practice. Okay, so this one is false. Dual relationships is actually the one that says you should not have two different relationships with a client. And this is not even the one about relationships. That's entirely separate. This one is one that's basically, you should probably not be someone's AFC and also say their insurance agent. But if there's absolutely no way to avoid it, make sure that the relationship is not exploitive. Okay, make sure that the client is protected. That is your responsibility. Okay. So, trivia. What should you do if a newspaper article accidentally lists you as having both AFC and a CFPE, but you only have the AFC? Okay, these are good answers. Yeah, it is your job to have them post a correction. So it's your job to follow up. You can't just let a misunderstanding like that stand. All right, so have them post a correction. True or false? It is okay for a client to send you information to your Gmail account. Lots of falses, a few trues, depends on what kind. Okay, so I'm taking from these answers that a lot of you guys are answering a different question than the question that I meant to ask. So the question that seems to be being answered right now is, you shouldn't send anything to somebody's personal account when you meant to send, you should send it to their official account. However, here's something that's really important to know, and a lot of people don't realize this. Gmail is not technologically secure, and therefore you are not fully protecting a client's confidentiality electronically. Okay, and you are required by our standards of practice to protect a client's information just as much electronically as in person. So, what are some ways that you can send information electronically safely? So go ahead, you're going to have to start typing these in. If somebody has to send you information electronically, or what are some secure ways to send information? Dropbox is absolutely secure. If you have encrypted email, that should be fine, but you have to make sure you get somebody who knows what they're doing with encrypted email, because that is really hard to do, and you don't necessarily want to rely on it. Don't forget, snail mail is an option. Snail mail is considered secure, so that's the actual regular postal service. You can also have somebody do a fax is fine. Somebody can call you with the information if you need to. You can talk to them on Skype, talk to them in person. But something like, say, a social security number should not be sent through Gmail. Okay? So yes, everybody whose business uses a Gmail platform, and I know people personally who do, you definitely want to research this. If you have a business Gmail account, they may have different encryption. I don't know, but you definitely would want to check. And somebody asks, I would never ask for a social security number. I would imagine most people don't need to, but just in case, you want to make sure any kind of information, even if they're paying by credit card, that's the sort of thing you don't want to send through Gmail. Okay. So, any questions on this? This seems to be our first tough question. All right. So, is this available on the AFCPE site? If you're asking for secure transmission of information, our database is secure, but we don't provide anything for you guys. However, the information, these slides will be available on the site eventually, along with the recording, and all the standards of practice and the code of ethics are available on the AFC website. All right, another ethical scenario. You have a client with a gambling addiction. She has already run through most of the family's liquid savings and has started taking money from her retirement account to fund her addiction. Her spouse and their 3 children have no idea that their financial future is at risk. Okay. If Gmail platform is secure, do we need to have disclaimers in our email footer? So this is not about a disclaimer situation. This is absolutely about a confidentiality. Your responsibility is to protect client's confidentiality. Regardless of what you disclaim, you have to do that as an AFC. Okay, so we have a few people who are responding in chat. Excellent. If anybody would like to answer over the phone, raise their hands. And we're going to start with Ashley. Ashley, go ahead. You've got 1 minute. Ashley Bernard?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, I would probably have a conversation with the client to see if either coordinating a referral out to someone who handles addiction, because that's not my specialty, and trying to maybe get some buy-in from the client to communicate in a safe environment to her family what those challenges are, so that you can start to have some accountability partners if you're going to continue to maintain the relationship.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Okay. Next we have Laurel Kubin. Laurel, go ahead. You are good to go. Laurel, can you hear us? Okay. I think we have some sound issues there. So, Elena Johnson, you are good to go.
My hand, but can you hear me?
Yes, your hand is up. Everybody who does not want to speak on the phone, make sure you put your hand down after each time. Okay. So we're going to take one more person. Every time how much fun it is going through this whole list, by the way, of names all at one go. Joyce Harris. Oh, nope, her hand went down. Mary Nash. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. I certainly would recommend that she see some sort of counselor but my ethical obligation would not, I don't think, be to the spouse and the 3 children if I knew this in confidence.
Okay, you make an excellent point. Thank you. I'm glad Mary made that point because that was one of the points I was going to be making. The client you have is the client who's in your office. Now, if you guys are doing group counseling together, even so, you're not allowed to share that information that's given to you in confidence by one to another family member, not without their permission. Okay? So, you will probably have to refer them out unless you have a specialty in any sort of addiction or gambling. Okay? Again, you would strongly encourage her to talk to her family and to get help. Okay? So, we have a suggestion from Carol, which is excellent. Maybe have the client bring in the spouse. You can absolutely be there with her when she talks to her spouse about what's going on, right? You're there to support her, but you cannot break confidentiality to tell her family, okay? So we have some really great comments in chat. If you are paying attention, I would also scroll through the chat and see those too, not just listen to the phone calls. And again, if you do not want your hand raised for phone calls, you want to make sure it's put down now. There's a lot of hands on the list, so be sure that you only have your if you want for me to select you when you call in. True or false? Counselors must not engage in sexual harassment. Okay, that is true. Okay, counselors should not engage in sexual harassment. I love that somebody said that's easy. I would hope a lot of these are easy. You know, in general, our standards are meant to be good standards that we can all agree with. Okay, so yes, that is true. Under what circumstances can you break confidentiality? And there are 3. Okay, these are really specific. They're actually slightly less specific than some of these. Okay, but in general, we're covering the important things. Yeah, harm to self and others as required by law. Okay, so here they are. To protect the client, again, that's mostly in threats of self-harm or suicide. To protect others, again, that's not necessarily some financial harm that might happen like in the gambling scenario. This is more health, like immediate risk of danger. Okay, if somebody says they're going to hurt somebody else, that's something that you have to tell. And then as required by law. Now again, as required by law seems like a really, really obvious one, but it's not always so obvious as to whether or not something is for sure breaking the law. So Carl makes an excellent point. If there's a court order, that clarifies things enormously. If somebody comes in and wants to access your client records, what should you require? If you've ever watched a cop show, this has come up a lot, so this should be easy. Okay, yeah, you'll need a warrant or a subpoena. You need something from the court that says that you're required by law to give up the information. Okay, so these are good answers. All right, true or false? It's okay to pay referral fees as long as you don't accept them. Okay. We have a variety of answers coming through. People are still typing from the first one, but yes, that is false. Referral fees, across the board, not okay if you're an AFC or if you're certified by AFCPE. So, true or false? If you have a horrible client and you have to fire them because you cannot deal with him or her anymore, you are required to help them find another counselor. Getting a variety of answers, and I'm realizing I should have separated this from the last true false because some of these could be answers from the previous question. I think I like Jerry's answer the best, which is you are required, but you're doing the best you can. Okay, you have to make a good faith effort. But your job is to refer them to someone else. So that does not mean you find them someone else. Your job is to refer them to someone else. Okay, and remember, not everybody drives everyone nuts the same way. There might be some people who would absolutely love your client. They just have a different personality than you do. So it's always really helpful, and it's really important actually to have other people that you can refer clients to. Even other financial counselors. Do not think of them as competition. Think of them as someone else you can refer people to if you need to. All right, this is also true if you have too many clients, you cannot really service them all properly. Just have too many than you can handle yourself. You need to start referring them out. Better to do that than have people not get the help they need because you don't have the time. What if they are violent? If you actually have somebody who is dangerous, we are never going to require you to send a dangerous person to someone else, okay? But that's not a confidentiality thing. If somebody has threatened you, then that is something that you might want to consider actually reporting, okay? Again, duty to report, excellent. All right. You are never allowed to date a client, current or former. You're never allowed to date a client, current or former. All right, we have a mix. I love it when we have a mix because then I feel like I'm teaching something. We have a lot of people saying true. We have a lot of people saying false. So, strictly technically speaking, yeah, I would not want to is also, I think, a good answer, but everybody's got to be themselves. Technically, that's false, but you do have to wait 2 years. Okay, so the rule and the standards of practice is you cannot date anyone who is currently a client. And technically, the rule is you can't have sex with anybody who is not been a client for at least 2 years. I would just argue that, in general, avoiding relationships with your clients is a really good idea. If something is occurring with your client and you feel like things are heading in that direction, I would terminate the client relationship immediately and then wait 2 years, just to be on the safe side. Okay? You must protect clients during group work, both physically and psychologically. So I have a question, what about 3 years? Waiting 3 years is even better, but 2 years is the one that's required by the standards. Okay? So, and this is a pretty obvious one. This is one true, but this is one that is true, but also easier to say than to do. Imagine you're in a group scenario and somebody's getting upset. That means you're not protecting them psychologically. Okay, so you have to be really careful when you're thinking about doing group work. It can be a very valuable way to support clients and help bring in outside points of view, and sometimes people learn better from their peers. But it's really vital that you make sure that everybody is protected and nobody walks away thinking, oh my God, I feel worse than I did when I went in. Okay? How can you protect them physically? Stand between them and the person ready to throw the punch? That is an excellent question. But if you do not feel like you can physically protect your clients, you might need to have other arrangements. You might need to have someone else there. Maybe you have an arrangement with one of the clients that they will help step in if somebody gets out of hand. And anybody who is threatening or violent needs to be evicted from the group pretty much immediately. Okay, you cannot risk everybody else's health and welfare in that situation. All right. Another scenario, and we're going to probably skip the phone call on this one. We're just going to try to go ahead and chat. Okay, so an officer you're counseling, by the way, this is actually a real person scenario. An officer you're counseling recently got a promotion ahead of schedule, a sign that she's a rising star in the military. What you know, but her superiors don't, is that the officer is using sketchy financial transactions to cover the fact that she is deeply in debt and barely managing to make ends meet. One false move and she could lose everything, making her finances a potential security risk. Okay, while people are typing up on that, remember, you don't always do it in advance, but do your best. Again, that's absolutely true for security. And you want to have rules in place about violent behavior. Okay, so what do you do in this ethical scenario? We have discussed the security issue, focus on the client, encourage you to tell supervisors. Yes, so I'm glad that Dana brought this up. If you are a military counselor, you're probably required by your program to report her. Confidentiality is not in place in that circumstance. There is a requirement to report rule, okay? If you are not a military counselor, then it gets a little bit more of a gray area, and this is where you'd want to have policies in place as much as possible. But if you are a counselor for the military, they are actually breaking military law, and they do actually have laws about this. I had a very interesting discussion about affairs in the military. So apparently, if you have an affair, you are absolutely breaking military law, okay? And that is something you're required to report. So if somebody has a child out of wedlock and they're paying child support and you find out and you're a military counselor, you have to report that. But if you have two people who had children with multiple women who are not, say, and you're not married to any of them, that does not have to be reported, okay? So I can absolutely tell from these responses who is a counselor in the military, who's like a military counselor, and who's a civilian counselor. So you're getting completely different answers, okay? And it does depend. This is where your circumstances matter, okay? This is where it really matters who you're reporting to. And we have a question. Are we talking about security risk for national security? So yes, that is security risk, but there's also other factors to consider too. Okay, and here's a tough situation. Let's say this is a situation, you know about this. You're required to report it, but you're military, because you're a military counselor. But this person is supposed to deploy tomorrow. And when you report them, they'll not be allowed to be deployed, which essentially means they get fired. Okay, suddenly their family might have to leave base housing. That was their housing. Clearly, they don't have any savings because they're in deep, deep financial trouble. Okay, this is really, really a tough call. And this is exactly the sort of situation where you want to have a policy in place. Okay. And also, we have a suggestion to go to the JAG office if you have questions about an ethical scenario. Not a bad idea. Again, you want to make sure you know what the laws are with the folks you're working with. Okay. We do have a question as to whether the additional income from deployment will help fix their situation. It depends wildly, I'm going to guess, on their situation. But again, you're required to report up the chain of command if necessary. Specifically with the activities where that were considered sketchy, the person who gave me this scenario explained them to me, but I didn't fully understand it. It involves a lot of borrowing from organizations that lend just to the military in certain circumstances. So it is definitely a process, but it does get complicated. And doesn't this mean military won't share what they need with their counselors? You would think that's the case, but that's clearly not the case. It is a tough call. You'll want to speak with your supervisor, especially if you're working with the military. Okay? Any more comments or questions? We have somebody say it's not illegal. It actually apparently depends. There is a martial law. We have a law that impacts our military that's separate to everyone else. Okay? And again, these are all the things that I learned while doing these scenarios with my coworkers and getting information from other folks. By the way, if you have an ethical scenario that's come up at any point in your career and you think it'd be interesting, please send it my way. We're going to have more ethics webinars down the line, okay? And I would love to have more real-world ethical scenarios to present. Also, if you're going to be at Symposium this year, I'm going to try really hard to have an ethical session there, and I'd love to have some scenarios to do there. So we have sketchy is not illegal. It depends on what it was. Sketchy is intentionally vague. A lot of these are vague to make it apply to multiple situations and to prompt some discussion, okay? So in general, the important thing to note is security clearances can be impacted by credit, and so that is also something to keep in mind. And again, know the requirements of where you are. And yes, if you can develop a plan that'll get them out of that situation, that is the best solution. All right, trivia. Can you record sessions to write notes later? Okay, I have a few yeses, a lot of no's. I have a lot of people saying with permission, and that is the correct answer. You can record sessions, but only with written consent, and it does have to be written. You have to be able to produce it later if you need to. And in general, of course, getting permission in writing is pretty much always your best option. All right, this one is going to be a long one. Okay. Ooh, I have weekend records on a client. That's interesting. Everybody has different standards there. Most financial counselors, I think, will have records. But again, you want to make sure that you keep those protected, keep them confidential. Okay. So basically what I'm asking for this question is, what are all the different factors for which you cannot discriminate? And there is a pretty long list. So let's see if we can catch everything. Sex, income, age, and race. Income sort of counts, sort of. These are all true. Gender, socioeconomic status, that's what I was thinking for income. Disability, you guys are typing faster than I can actually read. Religion is true. National origin is technically not on the list, but that's one for housing, and it's always good to follow the housing ones. Affirmative action, basically, yeah, if you have the most comprehensive list, you're pretty close to being there, okay? I love the folks that say for anything, and in general, I feel like that's not a bad approach. Gender identity, so here, let's put the list up so we can also look at them together, okay? So, officially, it's age, color, culture, disability, ethnic group, gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, marital status, and socioeconomic status. So, age, cannot turn somebody away just because of their age. I feel like color and race kind of go hand in hand, but you could also argue that race has a lot to do with national origin. Culture. Culture might be how you do gender identity. Okay. So we have which standard practices from. I don't have all the numbers memorized, but it's probably in the first couple of groups. So it's probably in the first 10 or so. That's where I feel like the most common ones are. Sexual orientation might also be a place where gender identity might sort of, but not really fit, but you cannot discriminate based on sexual orientation. And again, marital status, single or married, cannot discriminate for that. Ethnic group could again be another possibility for national origin, but also just in general ethnic groups. Okay, and again, if your organization has a more inclusive list, you should follow that. Okay, you should always be following the most inclusive list when it comes to non-discrimination practices. If this is standard practice 1, that is awesome. Thank you, Sherry. And yes, I also encourage everybody, again, if you have not ever or recently gone on the website, check it out. Veteran status, again, is not on the list. You're excellent. If you feel like other things should be added, let us know. We are always taking feedback. Yeah. And I agree with Jerry. It's really hard to make a good faith case for discriminating, I think, on anyone, since you're supposed to be helping everyone. Okay. What duty exists if you expect some impairment? This is an area where you may have to refer. Okay, we actually have had a webinar already this year. We had it in January on able accounts, which is specifically for people with disabilities. And special needs trusts are coming up in May. So we are actively encouraging people to work with individuals with disabilities. However, if you feel like that's outside of your ability, then you may need to refer out. But your duty is, if you expect somebody impaired, you have to protect your client, okay? And I actually think we have a question coming about that coming up soon. Now, again, you don't discriminate against somebody with a disability. It's really important you don't do that. However, it's also really important that you don't try to work with somebody and you can't. If it's somebody who you do not have the skill set to work with, again, you want to protect them. But if you have a niche, but somebody outside of that comes to you, is there a line? That is an interesting and tough question. I would argue that if you have a niche, you would really encourage somebody to go somewhere else, but you'd have referrals. You say, okay, I'm not going to turn you away for this, but you'd be better off with, say, this person here, Jane Smith, who actually works with your specific issues, okay? So again, you have to know your limits and you have to be able to refer if necessary. So I think I caught everything. But again, if you have questions or comments, keep typing them up in the chat box. All right, another ethical scenario. You are helping a client create a budget for her and her partner. So your client wants you to add a large line item, almost 12% of the budget, that she refuses to explain. After you remind her that she is held to 100% confidentiality, she says the money is to buy marijuana for a partner. Without regular doses of marijuana, partners start spiraling emotionally and often commits acts of self-harm, sometimes damaging property in the process. Note that marijuana is legal in this state. What would you do? There are no issues even if it is illegal. Add to the budget. Okay, I have a note in here. If it's military, it's still illegal. We have some added to the budget. We are not to judge. Okay. You can have a lot of consensus on this one. This is actually related specifically to a person I know personally. And I'm going to ask if you would view this differently if she said that if he does not get marijuana, he starts breaking chairs around her. Because this was actually true. Okay, does partner have insurance? Add to the budget. Okay. Okay, so I'm glad we have some mentions. It doesn't change the budget, but talk includes safety and referral. Okay. This was one of the tough things that came up when this situation appeared in my life, and this was actually a family member. We were talking about their income and how they could not afford to pay off their bills. And she swore up and down he would never hurt her, but he was hurting himself pretty dangerously and he was breaking the furniture. So I think these are all excellent comments. Okay. So we have suggestions here. Refer to the domestic violence hotline. Again, that could put people in danger, but it is valuable if they're by themselves and it's not like a group counseling session. That could absolutely be a good choice. If you have experience with domestic violence, it's something you might want to bring up, that this is something that could escalate. If that's something that you're really comfortable with, refer. Okay. There are mental health issues here in this particular case, and it's one of those things where it's easy to say, hey, marijuana, it's not a big deal. But if damaging is happening, if property damage is happening, if self-harm is happening, it's something to consider that it's not just about the budget. Okay, it's also about health. It's also about welfare. Okay. Ooh, we have a question. What if it's not legal? Here we go. I think it's an excellent question. What would you do differently if marijuana was not legal? Okay, we have self-medication does not seem to be a long-term solution to the issue. Okay. I have somebody saying that this is not a clear-cut situation. I totally agree with that too. We're not outside budget conversations. Okay, it's possible it could be legally prescribed for medicinal purposes. I guess there is a question as to whether or not marijuana typically helps in those circumstances. So maybe refer to a doctor. We have don't judge, which I think is always a really good rule of thumb. You should not be judging your clients. You should try to really understand from their point of view. Speaking of that, let's do a little sidebar. Okay, so continue to talk about this if you want. And I do like Jerry's point that we're not mandatory reporters, except potentially in the military, or crime in general, unless it's self-harm or harm to others. We're not required to report. But talking about values, here's a question that has come up before. It's not, I think, an ethical question, but it's more of an understanding about how to work with clients question. And this is, say you have somebody who comes in and they are not making ends meet. Okay, they are really, really, really struggling. They're worried about losing their car. They're worried about losing their house. Okay, and you feel like you've helped them cut their budgets to bone, but they absolutely say that they must do 10% tithe to their church. What do you do in that circumstance? Okay. Okay, I see a lot of good calls. I am glad no one is saying don't tell them to tell them not to tithe. Okay, it's really important to remember that client values really are the values that matter most when you work with your clients. Okay, it is important to have a discussion like you would for any big line item. You know, is it something that you can afford? Is it important to you? If you must do this, what are you going to give up? Okay, because you can't just make money come out of thin air. Getting a second job might be viable, although it may or may not be viable long term. Okay, but it's just really important. The client's values are what should be driving your session with clients. It's really important you don't let your values interfere. Now, I've actually had some really great comments proposed here I did not think about. Apparently, some churches will accept volunteer time instead of tithing. That's an excellent volunteer to make. Okay, talking with their clergy is important. I personally believe that churches cannot possibly be requiring their congregation to go into debt to tithe to the church. Okay, so again, as much as possible, you want to respect the client's values. Do not let your values get in the way, and help them understand all the different possibilities, and help them understand that, you know, that's how budgets work. You can have something that's important to you, but you might have to give something else up. Okay? So, thank you for this little sidebar discussion. It's something that comes up actually surprisingly often. If it's come up with you, has anybody ever actually had this discussion come up with their clients in the past? I have, yes. I have often. Okay. So it sounds like you guys have this come up a lot, and you had a good chance to work through answers. Okay? And generally, churches do not require members to go into debt with tithing. I would sincerely hope not. I think I'd actually struggle a little bit with a church that requires that. Jerry makes a good point. I think many cases people feel reluctant to reveal like they're struggling because of how they look with their pastor or minister. Everybody has their own feeling about religion and about faith in general, but my personal belief is that the church exists in large part to support their congregants. And I would personally encourage them to embrace that role and see their pastor, minister, or imam, whatever the religious leader is, as somebody who's there to support them, because I feel like that's part of their goal in their life. Okay? So, but it's a tough subject, and you want to be really careful. All right. So, let's take a little bit of a break from the really tough ethical questions. How long do you have to wait before getting involved with a former client? And by involved, I mean romantically. Okay. For some reason, we have some folks who keep saying 3 years. The answer is 2 years. 2 years minimum. Okay? So let's do a question that's actually kind of come up before. An elderly man comes in with his daughter. The man is worried about running out of money as he thinks his savings are depleting faster than they should. He appears to have dementia as he loses track of his thoughts mid-sentence. His daughter is his power of attorney and is currently living with him as she's between jobs. She claims her father has been giving significant amounts of money away to family members who are just, quote, leeching off of him at the expense of his future. She'd like to have referrals to discuss financial guardianship for her father. What would you do? Okay, we have who is the client, refer to Adult Protective Services, legal aid. So can we actually, I'm going to pause. I want everybody to consider, we're going to take some of these questions in turn. First, the question is, who is the client? That's an excellent question. Who is the client if they both come in together? Okay, we have a lot of discussion. There's no clear answer. So that's something that you'd want to determine, because it's a very possibly different discussion if they're both the client versus the other man who's the client. Okay? So again, Gabriel makes an excellent point. It depends on your organization's rules for who is the client. Okay, so it's important to have these rules in place. And if you work with elderly clients on a regular basis, this is something that might come up a lot. Okay? And Rebecca makes a good point. If she has the power of attorney, she is entitled to act on his behalf, but she is not, and I really want to emphasize that she is not entitled to take advantage of him. Okay? So, it's something a lot of people don't understand. Powers of attorney allow you to act on behalf of somebody, but you're not actually allowed to take advantage or abuse them. You're not allowed to act against their best interest. Now, the problem is just determining what's in best interest is a very thorny issue. Okay? So, what do you do if you believe somebody is taking it, if you think somebody's taking advantage of their power of attorney? Brian says, I'm not a lawyer. I think that's an excellent point. You know, it's tough. Okay. So we have a few folks recommending referring somebody to Adult Protective Services. That is not a bad idea if the client comes in by yourself and it's very clear that there's a situation. However, remember, you're required to get their permission. Okay. You're required to get the client's permission, and you're required to let them know that you've actually informed anyone. If you ever break confidentiality, even if it's allowed under the standards of practice, you're required to tell the client that. Okay? We have Carol saying, make sure that you establish facts with bank statements. That's good too. One thing that you would absolutely want to do in this situation is you want as much physical, non-questionable facts as possible. Okay? So, and we have somebody who says, yeah, if I was a daughter and she got reported to Department of Health and Human Services on this amount of information, she'd be upset, which is totally fair. You don't know the situation. It's very possible this daughter is truly telling the truth when he says everyone else is leeching off the dad and she's not. Okay? So, first step. Rebecca's saying that she's going through some of this with her parents right now. These are tough calls. I have to admit, my parents keep giving my sister money. I know how much they have. They can't really afford it. But one of the things you have to also keep in mind, too, is how your parents choose to spend their money and how elderly people choose to spend their money is their choice, unless they are actually, truly not competent to handle their finances. They have to make that choice for themselves. Okay. And then we have somebody, elder man wants to give money from somebody who thinks they're lucid but really isn't. Again, that's a tough call. You know, every part of some of these ethical scenarios can be challenging. This is why you need to have policies in place. And yeah, I have a lot of folks mentioning they have similar situations going on with their parents. It's tough, isn't it? You want to protect them. You want to keep them safe. Okay? But yes, who determines who is lucid? Okay? Has somebody actually gone to a neurologist? These are things you'd want to recommend. So, what kind of concrete information would you want to gather before you start making any kind of judgment calls? Okay. Bank statements. Excellent. What else? Power of attorney. I think you could totally ask for that and just say so you could have it on record. Okay. Past spending history, bank statements. Yeah, if you could find a way to track spending, that's super valuable. Receipts, paper trails, credit reports, credit card statements would be valuable. Pulling a credit report so that you see what credit cards are out there with. People are opening credit cards in that guy's name. He doesn't even know. Okay. I don't know if you can really legitimately ask for information from doctors, but I guess you give it a shot. Okay. Yeah. Getting credit freezes could be a good idea. Yeah, so Gabriel makes a really good point. Situations like these are why you want liability insurance. And people in private practice can struggle to get liability insurance because it's still kind of a growing industry. But yeah, you want it. You need to look around. You need to find liability insurance specifically for these. Okay. If any police reports have been filed, that's hugely, hugely important. So I have Rebecca suggesting getting a team together on this topic to present a symposium. I think it's a great idea. I encourage you to do that. So we want to find out how the money is actually being spent. We want to get bank statements. We want credit card statements if possible. Any receipts you might have. If you can get copies of canceled checks, that might be valuable too, just so you can see where the money is actually going. Okay. So the more information you get, the better. Michelle's saying that this could limit the information. So I just want to check to see which information is, oh, right. If power of attorney is general or special power of attorney can limit information. That's true too. But if the elderly individual is your client and the daughter is there on his behalf and genuinely working to benefit him, he will probably submit more. You should be able to get all the information you need. All right. Once you have gathered all the information, then what do you do? So what do you look at it? And let's say the daughter is not, say, taking his money, but she is living off of him rent-free. What would you do? Okay. Nothing. That's his call. I agree. These are all good answers. Okay. So I have a question. Here's a good question. What if you're not sure what to do? Can you call, say, Department of Aging and just ask their opinion, but confidentially, not give any details, nothing personally identifying, but just call and get information? Okay. Does that seem like a good idea? Okay. So I think it doesn't hurt to get information and maybe getting a list of referrals that might be valuable to give. Actually, getting a list of referrals is a good idea too. Okay. So let's say the daughter is. Let's say the daughter's taking $500 from her dad's account every month. What would you do then? We have a question. What agency did you suggest? It depends. Every agency, I think, has slightly different names. In Montana, I think it's called the Agency on Aging. But in some places, it's Adult Protective Services. Some places have a Department on Aging. So I would just do some research into what the local elderly protective services are in your area. Okay. So we have, what is the daughter using the money for? Is there agreement in place? And this is another good example to develop your professional network, to have folks who also work in this area, good for referring and for consulting. Make sure that dad is aware of it. This is another reason why you want to pull all the paperwork. Okay. Question is, it's on caregiving services or not? So you may not know that. That's something you might want to clarify. We have a question. Is somebody with a POA allowed to remove somebody's personal access to the account? To the best of my knowledge, no. Okay. Power of attorney allows you to act on somebody's behalf. You're not allowed to prevent them from acting on their own behalf. To do that, I'm pretty sure you need a fiscal guardianship. So I think you actually need to get the courts involved. Okay. So again, it depends. It's really important not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she's helping him out every day. Maybe because she's serving as his power of attorney, he wants to give her some money. Maybe she's looking for work and he wants to help. Okay. So one thing to consider is whether or not there's another funding stream for that. That's a really good point by Lori. Sometimes if he is extremely low income, there might be a stipend available for caretakers. Okay. We have conservatorship or court assigned for financial assets. Guardianship are for care of the person. Good to know. Thank you. Yeah, David has an excellent point. So what happens if her boyfriend has suddenly moved into the house as well? And he's getting $500 a month. And the daughter is signing the checks. Okay, now we have a lot of people saying it's looking really, really unfortunate. Okay, it's starting to feel much more like an abuse situation. But what if he says it's okay with him? Okay. So these are really, really complicated, thorny issues. Okay. Sometimes it's not a clear answer. And I would actually like to tell you guys about a resource that I don't think everybody's aware of. But AFCPE actually has an ethical panel specifically for things that are really, really challenging like this. You can actually submit really thorny ethical issues to our board, if like real life issues coming up in your practice. If you're not sure what to do, submit them to our panel. We will evaluate them. I'm not on the panel, but the panel will evaluate them and we'll get back to you with suggestions, okay? We cannot necessarily give you a right or wrong answer. Sometimes in ethical issues, it's really hard to know what the right or wrong answer is. But it's good to know that you at least have somebody you can debate this with, in case you don't happen to be in a webinar where you have a chance to give it a shot. Also, again, if you have these really thorny issues, send them my way at s@afcpe.org. You'll probably already have my email address. You'll get it at the end of these slides. What I'll be doing is I'll be creating more ethical scenarios and ethical webinars as we go forward, and some of them will appear there. You might get a lot of information and feedback from the responses. Okay? So we have a lot of huge variables. Can we all agree that this is something that is not something you want to be deciding right on the spot? Okay? Can we all agree you not want to be sitting in this scenario and having to come up with an answer right then? Okay? So this is why you want to have policies. One of the policies might be that if a scenario like this comes up that's too big and thorny for you to deal with, that you have like a set of essentially make work homework that gets them out of the office so that you can decide what you need to do. Okay, so I would say gathering information is a really great, and it's not even just make work. You need to have that happen. You absolutely need to get that information. Okay, so you want to gather as much information as possible. I would absolutely go to somebody who's more of an expert in this arena, and it might be that your best case scenario is to refer them. They come back in, you say, listen, my area of expertise is not this, and I feel like I don't know the best way to help you, so I'm going to refer you to someone else. And you can even go to that person and not give them any specifics, but say, hey, I've got this scenario. If they came to you, do you think you could handle it? Okay, and you get this information, that the new referral, the new counselor's name, to the client, and they can choose to go forward. Okay, she has her referral to an attorney. That's not a bad idea because attorneys are required to help protect everybody's best interest too. But the question is, you know, you want to make sure that you refer them to an attorney that you trust, because not all people are good people. Okay, so are you ready for the next? Are you ready for a break for a little trivia question? I think we all need a breather, right? So, when is it okay to accept referral fees? Never. I am so glad this one is super clear. This question has come up more than once. So I really want to make sure you guys understand, never, ever, ever do referral fees. All right, and I hate to do this to you, but we have an even thornier ethical scenario. Your client has just found out that she's pregnant and is worried because she and her husband are barely able to make ends meet as it is. Her husband is a devout Catholic and wants children. Your client thinks she should have an abortion without ever telling him she's pregnant and is asking if you could refer her to an abortion provider. While you guys chew on that, from Jerry, we have, do we know why we're not allowed to accept referral fees? And it's standard of practice. There's a lot of research that was put into those. So you'll just have to ask whoever wrote them. We have a whole lot of people saying no outside of Lane. So we have a lot of people saying that they're not going to give a referral. So let's take referral out of the question. Or we have people saying totally refer. This is the sort of thing where you'd absolutely want to have a policy in place, right? But what would you talk about with her if you're not going to give a referral? So you have finances, okay? Do you really truly think somebody in this situation, though, is really going to be able to talk about budgeting right now? What would you talk about to get away from abortion to discussion? Now, keeping in mind, a lot of folks are suggesting talking about adoption or having a baby, but that's also pretty much applying your values as a counselor to your client, okay? It's really important. Yes, thank you, Sharon. It's really important to keep our own values out of it. Now, I'm going to guess a lot of agencies are not going to have something like this on their books as a policy, but really, this is a very touchy subject in our country. It's probably not a bad idea to create a policy of what to do if family planning of any sort comes up, okay? Jen makes an excellent, good point. Maybe before you even discuss budgeting, you say this needs to be referred to a family therapist, okay? If you're comfortable listening, this could be something where you can listen, but unless it's an area where you have specific training, you probably don't want to be giving advice. Louisa makes a great point. Probably a crisis situation, just not be ready to talk about finances. Need to refer. Do you actually have somebody who you could refer her to? Who here actually say yes or no? Do you have somebody right now that you know who to refer this person to if she came in? Okay, good. I'm glad we had a lot of yeses. Okay, we have somebody recommending to their physician. Okay, you can get her to talk about finances, then that's awesome. That's a much more neutral area to talk. Okay, we have some folks who are, that's an excellent point. You can say maybe you're not allowed to give an abortion referral, but you can talk about how to make ends meet if you think they'll be able to hear that at that point. Okay. And again, sometimes you have to keep in mind that when ethical problems come up, they can be crisis scenarios. Okay, we have some folks being recommended to a family advocacy or the chaplain. There might also be, if she is a member of some sort of congregation, church, synagogue, anything, you might be able to refer them to refer, if at all possible, to her own religious leader. But again, not everybody has those. So you have a consider here, it's out training to cross over from money to life, or speaking about issues where they could be crossing a lot of ethical boundaries. Excellent point, Christy. Excellent, excellent point. Remember, you are not necessarily trained in personal counseling, okay? And if you're not, you need to refer, okay? So, but yeah, having a good local referral is a huge importance. That local referral might be for a therapist or a counselor. The other thing you might want to also consider, though, to make sure that you're not limiting options, is you might want to have, if at all possible, more than one referral. Because you don't want to refer her to somebody who has, say, your exact same values. It's really ideal if you can refer to multiple people, because you don't want to put somebody in a situation where they feel like they have no options. So If you have United Way, 211 is a place where some people get information, and United Way will also have referral networks, but your agency should have a list of good referrals and ideally multiple referrals for different choices, okay? So we have somebody saying it'd be really unusual for this to come up. I would certainly hope so. This is not something that I think many people have had happen, but awkward situations happen, and you don't want to think about it after the fact. We have saying if it's against your own faith, you shouldn't be required to refer specifically to an abortion provider. I'm not actually saying referral to an abortion provider. I'm saying that this entire question is probably outside the referral of your knowledge area. This is maybe a referral to a counselor or a therapist type of referral. But again, you have to make sure those counselors and therapists aren't only counselors and therapists that agree with you on each topic, okay? So I would definitely explore this. Keep in mind that if you refer somebody to an agency that's entirely anti-abortion, you probably also need to refer them to an agency that is at least willing to discuss the option, okay? So, you know, whether that's a Planned Parenthood, there's some pregnancy crisis centers that are willing to discuss all options, but some are not. And we have a question, why should you be open to do that? Again, it is not your job to put your values on your client. You need to give them options so that they can explore their own values. Just like you cannot tell a woman or man who is interested in tithing to the church that they're not allowed to, you're also not allowed to put your values on your client in any way, okay? It's your client's values. There's somebody saying I should not go against my own values. What do you guys think about that? What thoughts do you have? Okay. This is definitely a tough argument. We have a lot of folks who are going either way. Okay. So I'm going to say this is beyond my knowledge area. I am not going to try to tell you exactly what to do if you feel like your values cannot be impinged upon. I'm just going to say that in general, from a counselor's perspective, it is not your values that matter. It is your client's values. And you have to decide for yourself how to handle that, okay? All right. So I'm going to let you guys continue mulling over that. And I'm going to give you guys a different slant on this. Would you do anything differently if you were friends with the husband? Okay. So, oh, somebody made an excellent point. They would not have somebody as a client if they were friends with the husband. That's not a bad idea. If you could, as much as possible, separate your clients from your personal life, and this is challenging because a lot of people would rather talk about their finances with their friends than a complete stranger. But this is how you can get into tough ethical scenarios, okay, is when you have clients who are also friends. I have to admit once, I had a friend who I got her degree as a therapist. I said, ooh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to have you as my therapist. She said, no. There's absolutely no way I can be a therapist for somebody who is a friend. It's just not ethically right. Same thing with family. Equally a tough point. Okay. Oh, and Nancy made an excellent point. I'd have to choose to keep one member of the couple once they divorced. So definitely as much as possible. If you have a friend who is wanting to come to you as a client, you might want to consider referring them to someone else who you trust. All right, let's have a nice, relaxing trivia question. We have a few more folks coming through. Yeah, it's a tough call. Can you tell a client's family member what they said in counseling? Okay. That's a whole lot of no's. Excellent. Only with their permission. So, and in general, probably they're not going to give permission. But that does not say you can't encourage them to share this information with a family member. Because remember, people with shared finances, they really do need to be talking about their finances for financial success. Okay, so you can't override your client's own desires, but you can certainly encourage behaviors that will help improve their chances for financial success. Okay, getting permission in writing is always a good thing. If you ever have to get permission, getting it in writing is just a really good way to protect yourself. And it's also good for the client because then you have something you can refer back to. All right, who's exhausted? But we still have a few more scenarios. Your client's savings are suddenly gone. She explains the money was spent repairing her car, and it comes out in the session she was driving under the influence and without insurance. She ran into a parked car and drove off without trying to find the owner of the car or leaving a note. I am glad I'm not the only one who's exhausted, but you know what? Ethical scenarios can be exhausting when I think about them in advance. Crispin has a great response. Yikes! Sadly, that is not a super helpful response in session. What would you? You actually have to discuss stuff with her. Okay. So we have a lot of folks telling you to report it. It's military, it's rough. Okay, so we have a couple different folks. We have a few folks who are just focusing on the financial aspect, and then we have folks about whether or not you need to report this. So certainly hitting a car and driving away is illegal. No questions. Does anybody know whether or not the counselor is required to report it? So we have clearly, it seems clearly if you're in the military, you have to report it. Okay. I've actually tried to look into this, and I don't think it's very clear, and I would want you to consult a lawyer if you're really concerned about this. From my research, it appears you're not required to report it if you saw it, but if she just told you about it, it's a form of like hearsay, you may not be required to report it. But again, you would absolutely want to talk to a lawyer. Do not take my word for it entirely, okay? However, that said, at the very least, what are you going to talk to her about it if you're not going to report it? Okay, so obviously, telling you to report it's probably not a bad idea. Talking to an attorney may not be a bad idea, but she may not be able to afford that. What can she do if she can't afford an attorney? Okay, some communities have legal aid, which is awesome. She can try for pro bono help. I've worked at a law firm as a secretary for a little while, and I'll tell you it's really hard to find pro bono work. But she can absolutely ask around. We have somebody saying it's her decision to report, not report. I think we've mostly come down to it being not necessarily our responsibility to report on her. If we did, by the way, for whatever reason, we'd have to tell her that we did so. One thing to consider is this is where it would be valuable to have a plan in place. If somebody tells you about a crime, are you required to report it? Probably a good idea to have a policy in place with the organization. Oh, we had a good idea to report in writing that you advise her to report the incident. I give you a little bit of coverage, but I'm going to say maybe not enough that I want to rely on if it's actually against the law. Some states have law referral services that might be inexpensive for a brief session. That's valuable. Absolutely, you want to talk about not having insurance. In general, not having insurance is, especially not having auto insurance, that is also, by the way, against the law in every state. But not having insurance is also about financial security and long-term safety, okay? Somebody might not want to use insurance because it's a hit and run. Here it says she doesn't have it, but you can also see that she wouldn't want to use it if she did have it, if she was a hit and run. So yes, I think I work for the military. I appreciate that everybody should mad respect military counselors. It sounds very challenging. Apparently, American Bar Associations, you might be able to get a 30-minute consult if you found them through the bar website. So the good news is she had savings. Hopefully that was enough to pay for things. So if it was enough to pay for things, where do we go from here? What do you talk about with her to go for here? Okay. She needs to build up her savings again, figuring out what to do in the future, how to prevent this from happening again. Discussing the consequences of not reporting. That's a good idea too. You definitely want to make sure she understands that if she is caught, there are much more severe consequences than losing savings. Oh, military has legal counsel you can refer them to. That is helpful. She also might want to check. Sometimes employers actually offer military or legal advice as a perk. Not often, but sometimes it's an employee benefit, just something to check out. Yeah, so Jerry points out military clients should understand there's a duty report. That is something that should be very clear to them going in. Coaching might help, and just in general, you know, having them talk about personal responsibility and financial effects, financial health impacts. Okay. Yeah, you know, you might want to refer her to someone if you think the drinking's out of control. It's possible, you know, ask if she's frequently driving while drinking. Okay. So I see that there's a lot of potential here for referrals. So insurance is expensive. What would you suggest to her to help her find insurance? Yeah, any driving while drinking is a problem. I totally agree with that. As somebody suggests Lyft or Uber, I just want to point out, as someone who does not have a smartphone, that's not always an option, but it's a cool one if she had one. So she had savings but not insurance. Why? Well, savings can be very minor. I know my insurance is about $100 a month, which is actually lower than a lot of people I know. It's certainly lower than everyone else in my family. Okay. So quotes, comparison shopping, this is good. I think we're having some really good suggestions that you can give her for what to do if she's drinking. Sometimes it can be really difficult while you're actually impaired to come up with what you can do other than driving. So maybe helping her create a list of options of what to do in that scenario, and possibly having her even put that in her wallet or something if she feels like she can't remember. Okay, pre-planning is always good. Somebody pointed out, when people confess these things, she believes that they're reaching out for help. Paula, it's an excellent point. So again, be judgment-free, but, you know, this is your chance to help somebody who might be calling out for help. Yeah, and you should know what your state's minimum requirements are for auto insurance. And ideally, you have at least a few different places where you can look up for quotes. But Sharon makes a good point. So really careful. You do not want to get into things you're not certified to do. Okay? So again, refer, not do yourself. Thank you, Sharon. All right, let us have a nice little trivia question. When is the right time to discuss fees? Up front, first meeting beginning. Yep. In general, you want to discuss fees before you charge any fees. Okay? So you don't want anybody to ever pay a fee without knowing exactly what they're paying. And my strong recommendation is any information about fees should not only be shared with the client, but that you should get in writing that they agree to it. So they need to sign something that says that they understand what the fees are and agree to them. Okay? So I am not sure we're going to get through every one of our ethical scenarios. I'll tell you right now, I'd say in about 10 minutes, with at least 15, 20 minutes to go, I'm going to stop for questions, okay? So we'll get as many of these done as we can before then. But another ethical scenario. Your client is the primary breadwinner for his family. In the course of a counseling session, you learn that he is actually supporting two families, neither of which knows about the other. He has children with both his spouse and his girlfriend, and his income is simply not enough for both. His families are starting to get suspicious because his job pays enough that there shouldn't be any financial trouble at their current standard of living. I'm going to just not even respond to David's thing. So, yeah, Dana pointed out, if he is military, this is bad. My original version of the scenario just had, it didn't specify that one was a spouse or not. But I have since learned that if you actually have an affair and have a child while you're having an affair, that is actually illegal in the military. Bigamy is illegal if he's married to both, but in here we just have a wife and a girlfriend. I have somebody saying, not my lane, which could, if you're not a military counselor, that could be one approach. Okay. Outside of the military, it's possible to, you just want to really focus on the finance part. The relationship marriage part, that sounds like a referral issue. Your client in this case, remember, is the client, the husband / boyfriend. It is not the families. So your focus and responsibility is to him. Now, if it's military, that's outside your control. You have to report him. But if you're outside the military, it's time to focus on his finances, right? Trying to come up with how he can afford to balance both families. Now, if it's about somebody actually had a case like this and walked down to the family therapist. It's great if you have a family therapist you can do that with. But you would want to refer out for anything related to the actual relationship part, okay? But it's also important to say, you know, financially, this is going to be challenging. So you're going to actually have to really work carefully to make sure everybody can be supported. I have somebody who says they generally insist that they work with couples, not with individuals. If you set up that guideline in advance, that's great. That would also solve this problem, at least in some part. Because I strongly suspect that if you're looking at the family's financial records, it will come out that there's 2 families. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is a couple of things. One, if clients are making really, really poor decisions, you're not going to be able to protect them from every outcome of those decisions. Okay, that's part of being a counselor. So you're going to do the best you can. But the other thing is, if you do something that you should not, consequences will come to you too, right? So it's really important to make sure you're not stepping outside your knowledge area. Okay, I have somebody noting this a really good scenario for financial coaching. So I appreciate the call out. All the FFCs out there, I'm guessing you know what you would do here, which is awesome. Okay. True or false? You can never use client data when publishing research results. Okay, Karen made a good point. It's helpful to have everybody in the family who's impacted by finances to actually be involved in financial counseling. We have a whole lot of this is not true, and they are accurate. Okay? However, you cannot include personal identifying information in those results. Okay? It has to be data with no names, exactly. Okay, and you should have permission. You should always have permission before you do anything that is going to reveal anybody's information, even just their stripped out, unidentifiable data. Okay. I have an IRB would be good too. I don't know what an IRB is. However, feel free to share so everybody knows. Thank you. In the meantime, a fellow counselor gets 24 long stem red roses on Valentine's Day. She claims she doesn't know who sent them, but you suspect they were sent by a client. So not your business. Mind your business. Keep your mouth shut. Not your concern. Oh, Institutional Review Board. IRB is Institutional Review Board, if anyone was curious. So we have a whole lot of not my concern or not my business. Okay? And we all seem to agree on that one. We have enjoyed the roses. It's really funny when I did a lot of these scenarios with other folks, just to make sure I was hearing a lot of the different questions I might get. This is one a lot of people, they struggled over, while others you guys struggled over, they found very easy. So, but minding my business seems to be the absolute answer here. And I'm going to go ahead and call that one a win. All right, can trainees observe counseling sessions? Okay, you have basically a lot of yes, and with permission, and that's absolutely true. It has to be written consent, as frankly, anytime you get consent, it should be in writing, just to be on the safe side, but this is one where we specify it must be in written permission. Okay. Also, super duper important that you never try to pressure someone into allowing a trainee to observe. Okay. You find out you have a fellow counselor who's referring people to a friend who sells insurance. The counselor is not getting a referral fee. We have bad. We have okay. Okay, I have a whole lot of responses. Mostly they're saying no. It's bad, not cool. Okay, what's the work policy? Report to supervisor. So, I'm getting actually a really wide range of answers here. A lot of it seems to be not so much that necessarily it's guaranteed bad, but doesn't really look good. So I'm going to give you something to think about. And this is something that that came to me in one of my classes. I'm getting my master's degree in financial planning. And we had this scenario where this family had a horrible situation because they did not have insurance. And I said, gosh, they really should have that insurance. And then I thought, you know what? I don't have that particular insurance. And the reason I don't is because it's really hard sometimes to sit down and do quotes and go talk to a bunch of different insurance agents and God, who do I trust? How do I know if that person's safe? And so the challenge I realized, because my original part, when I started this class, it was my stance was I will never sell anything. Even if I became a full-time financial planner, I would not be like most financial planners where, you know, they sell insurance or investments. You know, sales is part of their job. I would just never, ever do that. But then I thought, all of those people who need a will, you know, who might need liability insurance, who might need all these other insurances, they come to you quite often because all of that is just too overwhelming to do by themselves. Okay? So for me to say that I'm never going to sell anything basically means that is one resource that I am never providing. Okay? And this class was advertised and sold. So I will say I've never thought about this classes that way, but thank you. But what I kind of came away with from that is that selling insurance or selling investments is not inherently bad. But it's also really, really important when you get into that whole dual relationship scenario. Okay, you want to make sure that you don't want to have conflicts of interest. So, since I started talking, I feel like people have softened right here in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably really important that you do not ever refer just to one person. Okay, so if your fellow counselor is referring just to one person, that is, I would say, safely not appropriate. Okay, if your counselor is referring to multiple people and say, here's a list of people that I recommend, that is probably closer. Rule of 3, this is an excellent rule. And if you're going to refer, make sure you're vetting. Okay, so that's the other thing that's an important component of referral. You don't just go to the phone book and pull out 3 names, right? You want to make sure that you're actually referring to people who you at least talk to people that you've researched who are legitimate. Okay. Oh, so, and Lori makes an excellent point. Some organizations do not allow referrals. In that case, that's definitely a wrong thing. But yeah, also educating people on how to find resources is also a really good tool. Okay. Consumer protection information is also valuable. It's really, I mean, there's nothing to say that you cannot have a handout that says, here's what to look for when looking at insurance agents. Okay. That, to me, helping somebody find or understand how to look for a good insurance agent, that's part of helping them financially. Okay. Some organizations also will have a list of referrals. That's good too. And if that organization had a list of referrals and this guy was referring outside of that, that is not good. Okay. So again, ethics can be very they can depend on the situation. Okay. They can be very situational. So, what do you do if a client needs a service you can't provide? I think we're getting really familiar with this word today, aren't we? So, yes, refer, 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 refer. Okay? And then we may finish these ethical scenarios. You work at a nonprofit housing agency. One of your clients is failing to thrive under the agency's counseling model. You've just gotten certified as a financial coach, and you're sure that your client will respond really well to the coaching model, but agency guidelines don't allow you to deviate from the agency's script. What should you do? Okay. You have referring to another coach, click on script. Okay. Refer. I am really glad nobody said, take them on as a private client, because you're absolutely not allowed to do that. Now, I will say, I can't speak to every place on earth, but in Great Falls, Montana, which is where I was last year, the number of financial coaches, to the best of my knowledge, is exactly 0 in town. So if you were the only person literally in the entire town who could serve this person, I would go to my supervisor and say, listen, here's the situation. Oh, hi, Laura in Helena, Montana. Anyway, I would say this situation, this person really needs coaching. We have no other options. Is there any way the agency can refer to me, and obviously with the full knowledge of everybody involved? Alternatively, is it possible for me to do some sort of special session with this client just from the coaching model to see if it helps? Okay, and that is really important. You have to know what resources are in your area and how many there are. A lot of these questions that come up for therapist questions, Great Falls, Montana has 3. To the best of my knowledge, we only have 3 therapists in the whole town serving all 60,000 people there. So, you know, sometimes it's harder. You really have to be aware of what your options are, and sometimes you might have to, you know, think of what other options can I explore. But again, the important thing is to be really upfront, and always, if your client's best interest is at heart, you're going to be, should be okay. You always need to make sure that you're doing what is best for the client. Okay. All right, I think I only have one more left, and I think we have time. You're running a Vita site. A client comes in a brand new Porsche and wearing a $1,000 suit and asks you to do his taxes, claiming he's only earned $30,000 in the last year. Somebody's laughing, so that's at least good. Okay, we have a variety of buy my own taxes, do the taxes, but don't do the taxes. They could be gifts. By the way, a gift would probably be gift task issues there, but refer to a counselor. We have a lot of wows. I actually had this one reviewed by somebody who does Vita taxes, and his response is, you don't ask questions. And he said this has actually happened to him before, maybe not this exact scenario, but he says that he would have done the taxes and he would have not asked any questions. So there are a lot of good points here. We have no idea what the situation is. And while we might be able to excuse ourselves if we're just really not sure, if he has tax documents that show $30,000, you know, do the taxes. But I do have some Vita volunteers saying they don't have to do any taxes that they're suspicious of, and I'm glad to know that's an option. So we have tax preparers are held to higher standards and have to ask questions. I have to admit, I'm not sure about that if you're like a Vita volunteer, but I've never done the Vita volunteer training, so I appreciate the Vita volunteers who are making suggestions here. Okay. And again, it doesn't hurt to remind him what tax rules are. So, all right. I think we've had some really great comments to these and really great comments in general. I want to make sure we have some time for taxes here, okay, or not for taxes, some time for questions here. So here's my information. You can always call me if you have any questions. You can email me. Before we go into questions, to make sure we don't miss it, the code phrase for today is beans on toast. And I'm going to type it in chat so you can see what it looks like written out. My name is Summer Red, by the way. I am the Professional Development Manager at AFCPE. I've had people asking why these code phrases are getting kind of weird. And the reason is we're working on hopefully getting a new database in the near future. And the code phrases are going to be the preferred way to fill in information. It's going to make it a lot easier to turn them in. So beans with an S. For those who have never heard of this, this is apparently a common British breakfast. So beans on toast. Potentially no spaces. May matter now in the new database. Anyway, a lot of people are enjoying this. But any questions you have, other than just about the beans and the toast? Somebody pointed out after Hurricane Harvey hit the area, a lot of high wage earners are making a lot less money. That could be true for the tax question. Okay, this is for 2 CEUs. You want to make sure that you specify the type is not webinar for this. The type is ethics/practice standards. Okay, so ethics/practice standards for the type. Okay, so I have lots of folks who like the beans on toast. What other questions do we have? Any questions on ethics, on the process? Yes, you fill out a form on the site. So your first CEU, what you do is you log into my.afcpe.org, click on forms, and then click on the individual CEU form. It's the third one down. Okay. You want to type that when you're submitting for CEUs. Sorry guys, this is not going to get automatically added to your account. You have no way of doing that. So you're going to have to submit all of these. And I'm going to get to process all of them. Woohoo! I'm glad you guys were enjoying this. Again, if you have ethical scenarios, please, 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 please turn them in. It's my email address right there, sred@afcpe.org. Any interesting scenarios that come up, even if they don't seem as big or dramatic as some of these, please submit them. They'd be really awesome. So I have an organization that does not follow the SOPs if I don't identify myself as an AFC. So you're an AFC regardless of who you're working for. But if you want to make sure, you can definitely check with our ethical panel, and they might refer you to our certification council. They're the ones who have the final answer. Copy of the slides. The slides will be emailed out along with a link to the recording of this webinar in a couple of days. It'll be sent to everybody who's registered, so you should be able to get it. Type. When you enter their CEUs, you're going to have a place where it says credit type or CEU type, and that's where you put in ethics. And it's, I think, the last one on the list. It can be really confusing. How to get credit, again. So go to my.afcpe.org. So that's how you log in anytime you do anything with your AFC. That's how you get to the dashboard. Then once you're there, you'll see a black bar up top. And one of the words on the black bar is forms. Just click on forms and then go down to individual CEU form. And then just fill that out. The code phrase will be beans on toast. On the drug question, if it's illegal drugs, do you have to keep them as a client? Yeah, their drug activity and criminal activity is definitely not a protected class. So if you feel like having them as a client, despite the fact that they're doing illegal drugs, is something you just cannot do, you are allowed to terminate them. But again, you have to try to refer. So ethics/professional standards is correct. Thank you. Somebody says a really good presentation. I appreciate that. On the Vita situation, you don't know what else he has to pay for. Maybe he lives with his parents. That's a good point. Maybe he could be spending his own money other ways. Who do I talk to about the CHC certification, changes and dues owed? I would call and ask for Michelle Starkey, and you can also try asking me, and I'll see what I can do. Okay. There's no certificate. You don't use a certificate for this. You use a code phrase. It's usually either or. Okay. Thank you for all the thank yous. I appreciate it. How long does it take the ethical panel to respond? I have to admit, I have no idea, but usually when you submit things to our panels, it's between 30 or 90 days, depending on what the question is and who the task force is. My full name, again, is Summer Red. Summer is spelled like the season. Red is spelled like the color. Okay. Thank you, everyone. You guys were really wonderful attendees. Thank you for taking these seriously. I know sometimes it can be tough talking about these. Also, by the way, anybody who's going to symposium, we're going to try really hard to have an ethical session somewhat similar to this one. I'll be presenting it, and it'll be like this, but much more fun because you'll be able to talk to each other, and we won't have to do it while reading a chat box. Okay. For everybody whose audio went out, beans on toast is the code phrase. Yeah, the next symposium is in Portland, Oregon. And apparently I'm supposed to tell everybody, instead of it being a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So just plan ahead. Okay, beans on toast is the code phrase. Yep, we're not really using the spaces. Oh, thank you very much, Elena. So again, if you have any questions, if you think of something later, feel free to email me or call me. My contact information is right there. And for everybody who liked this webinar and works with folks with disabilities, I did a webinar for FPA Connect on ABLE accounts. That should be available on your member dashboard. You enter the code word when you're submitting your CEUs on your dashboard. So it's at my.afcpe.org. And then you just go to forms and the third one down, which is individual CEU form. So thank you, everyone. I'm just going to stay here for another 5 or 10 minutes. But if you do not have anything else you want to ask, feel free to check out. You guys did great. So somebody said they don't have a place for the code for phrase on the form. There's two buttons you can press. One says, I will submit a certificate, and one says, I'll use a code phrase. You'll have to click the button next to, I will use the code phrase. Okay. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I completely forgot about that. And yes, I hope to see a lot of you. I'm really looking forward to that session. I'm hoping you have some of your ethical scenarios to do there. Code phrase is beans on toast. I'll type this again in the chat box. Okay. Oh, hey, somebody took my storytelling class in San Diego. Thank you, Jeff. I'm glad you're there. I'm glad to see you again. Okay, and again, beans on toast inside the chat box is not sufficient for getting your CEUs. You do have to actually submit them in the individual CEU form. But hopefully I've seen it enough now that they'll remember to type it in. Oh yeah, beans on toast with an S. It doesn't really matter right now because I'll be processing these manually, but at some point they'll be automatic hopefully, and then you'll need the actual S. The agenda, you can just say we were talking about ethical scenarios and ethical topics. I'm taking from this a lot of folks are filling out that form right now, which is awesome. This is also a good time to ask on how to fill out these forms. Thank you, Connie. I'm glad you guys have been engaged. I really enjoyed it.